This is what you wanted.
Hey, what is going on, everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7 out of 10 day. Got some more first impressions for you guys. That's right, this time around, we're going to be taking a look at the name, the face behind Moonlight Dreamblade. It's going to be Setsuka. Wow, her design looks absolutely amazing. Her animations look so crisp and clean. The impact of that hit is amazing. But with all that being said, what is she? And, well, is she gonna be good? That is what we're gonna talk about in this video and more. We're gonna talk about her star signs, we're gonna talk about her skills and her kit, we're gonna talk about her artifact, and then of course we're gonna talk about potential builds that you can use on her, and specific artifacts and specific team compositions, right? So if that is something that seems of interest, then continue watching on. What we're gonna do though is start off with her star sign. Setsuka is a fire thief of the Scorpio star sign, which means that she actually has really high base attack and pretty decent amount of speed. 113 speed is nothing to laugh at here, but she also does imprint into some critical hit chance, which is very nice, and she's not she doesn't have any like extraneous extra stats, right? Now the interesting thing is she actually does self-imprint into health, but that is going to make a lot more sense once we take a look at her actual kit. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some other Scorpio thieves that you might be familiar with, right? Because sometimes it's a lot easier to get a sense of what the character's like when you look at existing units. The first one is going to be Genoa. Genoa is a very popular Scorpio thief and just goes to show how much damage you can really put on a unit, right? Setsuka seems like she can put out quite a bit of damage. We'll get to how she scales with damage later, but yeah, Genoa is a unit that you can compare her to. I think a unit that might actually be a little bit more comparable would be something like a Specimen Says. You do want to build Specimen Says quite bulky, and Specimen Says does come with Evasion as well. And of course, the Moonlight Dreamblade unit, Setsuka herself, is indeed an evasion unit. You can build Spez with quite a bit of HP while still maintaining a good amount of damage and a bit of speed, which is kind of nice. But we're going to move on into another Scorpio thief, right here, Twisted Eidolon Chiron. Yeah, he is a unit that you normally just build with a ton of bulk. At least I prefer to build him with a ton of bulk. And you can build him with some damage, you know, crit rate and stuff like that. I just opted to go for effect resistance here, but he actually doesn't imprint into HP either. So a lot of the common Scorpio thieves don't imprint themselves into HP. Other examples of heavy hitters are, they're like 4 stars and such, but like, you know, Bloodblade Corinne, for example, is another unit that exists out there that is a Scorpio thief, right? But anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and head back to Setsuka's preview now that you kind of have an idea in the back of your mind of what units she can be compared to, right? So she is going to be a little bit more unique though, and we'll get to that once we take a look at her actual kit. So here we go. Skill 2 is Suppressed Desire, where she increases evasion of all allies by 30%, and when an ally except for the caster evades, counterattacks. After attacking, when Fighting Spirit is full, she consumes all of it and grants Demon Blade Unleashed to the caster for 1 turn before activating Blade Art Bewitched Blossom. That's a lot of unique effects over here. But Blade Art Bewitched Blossom consumes all HP to attack all enemies and increases combat readiness of the caster by 50%. The damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's lost health. So this is actually quite an insane skill here. This, by the way, is just a passive. None of this is an active skill. And the other thing is the buff that she gives herself, the one for 1 turn, is Demon Blade Unleashed. It's a unique effect where it increases her attack by 200%, and she cannot die for a certain number of turns, but cannot be subject to damage sharing effects, right? You might be wondering why that line is actually in there, but I believe it's so that you can't abuse her with Lady of the Scales, who's also just about to be released, right? At the time of this recording, she might actually already be out by the time you see this video. But yeah, they don't want that kind of synergy there, that unintended synergy going on. The first thing to note with this passive is that you're increasing evasion of everyone by 30%. That's huge. That means with a normal evasion unit, let's say Remnant Violet for example, you have 50% evasion, right? So with that 50% evasion, you will then have on top of it your 20% evasion from an artifact of some sort. So let's go ahead and take a look at Remnant Violet for example here. 50% evasion from his passive, and then going over to his artifact. I'm running Shepherd of the Hollow, but that gives you a 20% evasion, 70% evasion right off the bat. That extra 30% from Setsuka on the team will increase this to 100% evasion. The only unit in the game right now that can get 100% evasion by themselves is Afternoon Soak Flawn. No other unit can get that close. The closest we can get right now on one of these units is using Lone Wolf Payra. You can add an additional 20% evasion, right? With the Rampage buff, you get extra 20% evasion, which is nice. But keep in mind, Setsuka's is a passive, and as long as she is alive, you'll be able to apply this. Rampage is a buff, so it can wear out, it can expire as a buff on a unit. Right, so yeah, that is technically the highest you can go is like 90%. You can argue that if you're using Violet's artifact that you can get even more evasion. Violet's artifact is the one that ramps up with every turn, right? Violet's Talisman, you'll be able to get an increased amount of evasion that stacks up to 3 times. So technically you can get really close, or I believe if you plus 30 this, you might actually be able to get 100% evasion, but not guaranteed, not straight at the start of the match, right? So Violet Talisman is something that ramps up relatively slowly. But yeah, Setsuka is looking pretty interesting here for a lot of evasion teams, but it's still going to be quite gimmicky because evasion units tend to be quite squishy, right? You would like your evasion units to have more bulk, to have more HP, so they can at least live and deal damage that way. The other thing here is when she has full fighting spirit, you're going to be unleashing this extremely powerful attack. You're essentially taking like Abyssal Euphene's buff where she allows herself in trauma, she allows herself to gain a ton of attack, right? You're increasing your attack by 200%, which means 3 times your base, your whatever your normal attack stat is. So let's say you normally have 2,000 attack on her. You will increase that by 3 times, right? You're increasing it by 200%, and you will now have 6,000 attack. She cannot die during the duration you have this unique buff, which is when you want to pop your skill, right? Because, you know, it's going to proc at the same time, and it will consume all of your health, which is like which is pretty cool as a concept here. And then the amount of damage that you deal is proportional to your lost health, so you essentially want to build her with a ton of HP. You're going to consume all of your HP, nuke your opponent, and you're going to survive on a sliver of health, right? Because you cannot die with this effect. It's really, really nice. It's really cool. And honestly, I love to see these effects where you have a negative effect on yourself, but you can somehow turn it into something good. That's something that I really want to see for more units coming out in the future. We've seen it with things like Rinok, right, being able to stun herself. We've seen it with Fene being able to injury herself, and now here we're just going straight to consume all of your HP, basically, just off yourself, right? Sacrifice yourself to take care of your opponent here. The animation is amazing, and I think the impact of it, and you see the damage of it as well, is incredible. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue moving on to her skill 3. Rouge Aroma. Dispels all buffs from all enemies before inflicting Beguile and inflicting decreased hit chance for 2 turns. Ignores effect resistance of targets with less max health than the caster. And this also helps you gain 30 fighting spirit. So this is pretty cool. It is a non-attack skill here. It's basically a full buff strip against your opponent that ignores resistance as long as you have more HP. The Beguile is just a little bit extra damage on top, but the decreased hit chance is what synergizes with her kit so well. When your opponent's blinded with a decreased hit chance, they have a 50% chance to miss, right? And so when they miss, you have a chance to counterattack now whenever they hit your allies, which is amazing, actually. The synergy in her kit is pretty good, and you can see in this demonstration here, she had like 25k health. So you're pretty much ignoring the resistance of a lot of units out there, like the most common Soul Weavers and stuff with middling HP around 20k health, right? You're ignoring their resistance, you're ignoring DPS's resistances, so you don't have to build effectiveness on her. Her skill 1 is called Horizontal Slash, where she attacks the enemy with a sword and absorbs some of the damage dealt as health. Damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's max health. Okay, so this is pretty nice. It allows you to essentially heal yourself back up, and honestly, it allows you to just sustain yourself throughout the longer fights, especially because you're going to be counterattacking a lot if your teammates are dodging, right? Which is pretty good. There is a error in the tooltip here. It's supposed to say gain 10 fighting spirit every time you use Horizontal Slash, which is good. So she starts with no fighting spirit. You can gain 30 from your skill 3, and every time you use your S1, you're going to gain 10. It seems like it's going to ramp up relatively slowly, but we'll see more about it in just a second. Okay, the Soul Burn effect is actually kind of nice, so just increasing the damage dealt, which means you can absorb more of the damage as health. So it's built-in lifesteal, and I think they're doing this honestly because they're releasing that new set, the new set that allows any unit that successfully evades to have a 70% chance to counterattack. That would actually explain why she isn't able to proc this kind of counterattack off of the opponent hitting her as well, right? So if they miss on her, she can't counterattack, but if they miss on your teammates, she can. So she essentially has this kind of budget Elbrus ritual sword, right? Which is really funny because she is representative of the Moonlight Dreamblade artifact. So she essentially has Elbrus ritual sword built into her kit with some lifesteal, and if you build her on the new set that's going to be released that you can farm for, she will also have a 70% chance to counterattack whenever she successfully evades. So she has lifesteal, counter, and like an Elbrus in her kit, which is really interesting to see, right? They're starting to put a lot more effects together, it seems. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the artifact now, because her artifact, Lethal Whispers, also gives you the Moonlight Dreamblade effect of increasing evasion by 20%. This does not increase as you level up your artifact, which is kind of cool. But at max level, you can get this up to a 40% chance to activate the basic skill once more after you counterattack. Right? So once you counter, you will have a 20 to 40% chance to activate the S1 again. At plus 15, you'll only get a 30% chance, but that's already pretty decent. Honestly, her artifact is just Moonlight Dreamblade plus Dust Devil kind of merged together, which is also really interesting. Keep in mind though that a lot of her effects here are RNG based, and I don't believe she has any evasion of her own innately, besides the 30% that she gives everyone. So with an artifact, you're able to get her, specifically Setsuka, up to 50% evasion, right? So you only have a 50-50 shot of dodging yourself, but you could potentially help your teammates get up to like 100% evasion, which is actually kind of cool. Alright, so, yeah, that is already a lot of information and a lot of stuff to cover. Her lobby animation is also hilarious, so I just want to throw that in here and add that. She will be available through Drop Rate Up on September 4th, which is cool. It's in a week, so you guys better get your bookmarks ready for that. Right, but I think she's going to be very interesting to build. So, yeah, she's going to be able to ramp up a lot of her fighting spirit with her own artifact, be able to potentially attack twice, means that you can get up to 20% fighting spirit when you are using your counterattack with the S1 skill. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at some extra artifacts that we have that you might be able to use. Now, I'll be very honest here, there's probably not a whole lot that you really want to swap out her artifact for, because her artifact is already covering all the bases that she needs. But in case you are looking for other potential things, I don't know how it's going to synergize with the damage here, but Shepherd of the Hollow is always one on the top of the evasion list here. It increases evasion by 20%, yes, but the damage dealt that she will do increases up to a maximum of 24% as her HP decreases. So because she actually takes away all of her health and consumes it all to unleash the attack, I believe this would actually increase the amount of damage that she deals. Now obviously her own artifact is really good for ramping her fighting spirit up to get to that point where you can proc that passive, but this could make it so that she nukes really hard when she does proc. It could be kind of difficult to get her to proc her passive if you don't use her own artifact for the chance to, you know, hit twice, but it'll only be marginal, and her own artifact is really RNG with a 30% counter, or a 30% chance to proc a second hit, right? So you're already relying on her 50% evasion if they attack her, so you have to win that 50-50. If you win that 50-50, there's a 70% chance that you'll be able to counterattack with her if you're running her on the new set, and on top of that, if you proc the 70% to evade, then and you counter, then you'll have a 30% chance to attack twice. You see how many layers of RNG you have to get through for that, right? So Shepherd of the Hollow might actually be pretty good if you're just fighting like the AI, if you're doing Guild Wars or Arena, just to ensure that you get a ton of damage out. I don't know, could be kind of interesting to see. Yeah, and another one actually is sort of Summer Twilight. It's a little weird here because it doesn't grant evasion, but because her like extra attacking is actually something that targets all enemies, you can use this to technically penetrate their defense by 20% because she has no defense penetration in her kit, and this can again really amplify the amount of damage that she does. Obviously, the combat readiness increase is not going to matter too much. You're not really cleaving with her per se. She's really a unit that comes and does a bunch of burst damage in longer fights, in fights that take more turns, right? So you're not really going to benefit too much from the combat readiness, but the defense penetration, I think, is actually really solid. You would definitely avoid things like Moonlight Dreamblade and Dust Devil. I really don't think you need those types of things here. Because, you know, all that stuff is essentially combined together in her own artifact. I honestly don't think there are other artifacts that are really worth using or mentioning. A shout out to Double-Edged Crescent for the extra evasion, but also just when successfully evading, you have an extra chance to counterattack. They essentially just made the new set a better, like just Double-Edged Crescent. Just everyone gets Double-Edged Crescent as a set. Which is nice to see, but if you want the extra chances to counterattack, I guess this is a way to potentially go about it. And again, another shout out to like Violet Talisman. I don't think you're necessarily going to be able to use this on her because she will probably be built really slow in order to get the amount of HP that you really want, right? She's going to rely a lot on counterattacks and stuff to do her attacks. I don't think she's going to rely on turn cycling. And Violet Talisman really does rely on your unit to turn cycle, so you can get stacks of the attack and evasion up to 3 times, right? So yeah, just throwing that out there. I also don't think that anyone's going to be running Summer Photogenic here. You're probably not really going for too much attack on her, just building her with a ton of bulk, and you don't really need to ignore the damage sharing effects. If they're trying to share damage, you're probably going to just at least nuke the tank, and you know, that already in and of itself is a pretty good accomplishment in this day and age. But yeah, let me know what other artifacts you guys think are decent on her. Those are the main ones that I can think of. Shepherd of the Hollow, Sword of Summer Twilight, and of course her own artifact being the top 3. So let's go ahead and take a look at some sets that you can actually run her on. I'm going to be using Twisted Eidolon Chiron as my example unit for the builds in the future as well, and just throwing this out there before we get to it, I'm going to be equipping Bastion of Hope to my Twisted Eidolon Chiron. Her artifact, when maxed out, does give 988 health and 117 attack as well. It's more heavy on the HP side because it synergizes with her kit. So that's going to assume that this is actually her own artifact here at plus 30. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the sets though that you can be using on her. Obviously, you want HP on her, right? So let's just start with the 2-piece sets. HP set immediately right off the bat, probably going to be a pretty good choice. Another thing that I can definitely see people running her on is immunity, right? You can go for multiple like 2-piece sets, or you can do a 4-piece set with 2-piece sets. I think with the new set coming out, which is a 4-piece set, you're going to be running that, right? But HP set for extra HP, immunity set you could potentially use if you have some good rolls on there and you want to protect her against debuffs. Again, she only has a 50% chance to evade with her own passive and an artifact equipped on her, so it might be good to allow her to have some sort of protection against debuffs, especially ones that have units that have like non-attack skills that debuff you. Either that or just bring a cleanser with you at almost all times. Torrent set is also something that people can bring. It's going to decrease your max health, right? Keep that in mind, but I have seen some crazy people with Torrent Dragonbride Senyas that still have like 38k health. So you can definitely make it work as long as you have the right rolls. So Torrent set can really help your damage output, both for your S1 attacks, but also for your AoE attack that comes later on, right? Which is why I don't recommend Penetration set, because it'd only really help you on your S1 attacks, and they're not really hitting all that hard. Most of her damage comes from a burst with her passive. As for 4-piece sets, highly recommend the new Evasion set that's going to be coming out, which gives you a 70% chance to counterattack when you are hit. But other things that you can potentially consider, maybe like a lifesteal set if you want some more healing and regeneration going on. And if you really don't like relying on the RNG of having to evade first and then be able to counter, going for just a traditional counter set, which is a flat 30% chance to counterattack whether they hit you or not, might actually be okay, right? Again, we'd have to do some of the math on this, and you'd have to test out the sets for yourself, but counter set could actually be pretty decent on her if you're not a fan of the new set, or it can hold you over and tide you over until you get a full 4-piece set of the new set that's going to come out. Right? So those are probably the ones that I'd recommend the most. You're probably going to be building her relatively slow, and I don't think you need to go for too much damage on her, especially the attack stat, because she's going to be boosting that up ×3 when she actually lets her passive rip. Alright guys, let's go ahead and take a look at a sample build that I have here. I decided to go for a counter set because it doesn't add any additional stat lines here, just like the new Evasion set would not add additional stat lines to your set stats right here, right? So going for this, I have the 4-piece counter set and a 2-piece HP set. I actually don't have this boot fully reforged, but you can see here that there is room to improve. We can mod out something like speed here and potentially give some more attack percent, which could be helpful. Could also give flat HP if you just want to increase your bulk further. I did opt to go for some attack percent pieces here because you do want to have some sort of damage along with crit damage and crit rate. So she is actually quite a stat hungry unit. I actually have this like random ML Chem piece that looked actually pretty decent here, but mostly to increase my crit damage overall. I think the crit damage is going to matter quite a bit when it comes to the actual damage output. For this piece here, we just went for some flat HP, no speed, got some crit rate, crit damage, and then went for an HP main stat for the necklace. Same thing for the ring, went for an HP main stat piece, had all the attack, crit damage, defense, and crit chance. Those are all the other substats that we could ask for here. And the boot, we actually could potentially reforge this, get another additional 5% HP, which should boost us up quite a bit in terms of our totals here. And we can also get a ton of crit damage, right? We're already maxed out on crit rate, which is decent. We'll get a boost in attack, and you can honestly mod this speed out for like more defense percent or any other thing that you might need. Maybe even more flat HP if you really wanted to, right? With the reforge on this, with the conversion of the speed to flat HP and maybe the speed here to flat HP, you could actually potentially hit like 27k health on this build here, which doesn't seem too bad. We'd have to see her damage scaling numbers and then judge like how much crit damage we would need, but I think this is not a terrible idea of what you can expect to try to go for. This is with triple main stat HP percent pieces, by the way, and I think it'd be really difficult to get you know, the stats that you want while going for like a crit damage necklace. Okay, so this is essentially the only build I can really think of that she would want. She'd have like a no speed build going in on this. I guess you can technically go for like a destruction set as well, but again, before we commit to trying to build and show off a version of that, we want to see the data mine and what her multipliers are going to be. And last but not least, let's go ahead and talk about some potential teammates that you can be running alongside her. The first one that comes to mind for me is Assassin Cartusia, because he has a very similar passive where he increases the evasion of all allies except for himself by 20%, right? Setsuka is able to increase everyone's evasion by 30%. So technically with both of them together, you can increase everyone's evasion by 50%, which is actually really impressive. It's a pretty decent stat line. Assassin Cartusia also got buffed recently, so it is kind of worth exploring and seeing if you want to check him out, especially with the new Evasion set that's going to be released in the near future, right? That is going to be absolutely amazing for Assassin Cartusia and Evasion builds in general. And then moving on here, we have Lone Wolf Peyra, who is able to give a rampage buff to her dark allies, right? They will be increasing their speed by 20% and their evasion by 20%, which is kind of nice. A lot of the evasion units out there are actually dark element, so this is pretty good for boosting up everyone's overall effectiveness in combat. So what this actually means is that if you have an evasion unit on their own artifact, on some sort of an artifact that provides evasion, they have 70%. With Peyra, you have 90%, and with Setsuka's passive, you have 120% evasion, which is great. Overcapping on evasion can actually help, assuming this is how it works with the evasion and stuff, because we haven't really had overcap of evasion before, but we do have the precedence of this with overcapping of crit. So what happens is, if you have a unit that has increased hit chance, it will be your evasion minus their hit chance is their chance to hit, right? So if you have 100% evasion and they have a 50% hit chance, let's say they're using Eligos and Eligos has a 50% chance to hit here, then what's going to happen is you have a 100% evasion minus 50% hit rate, you only have a 50% chance to hit. That's how this works. And so what happens here is if you overcap on your evasion, let's say you have 120% evasion, well, 120% minus the 50% hit chance here, it means that there's only a 70% chance that Eligos can hit you if you have Setsuka and Lone Wolf Peyra's buff and you have an evasion unit with their own evasion artifact, which greatly increases the odds of your survival, and that can actually be really, really cool. Keep in mind, you can actually couple these units, Setsuka and Assassin Cartusia, with Afternoon Soak Flan. As long as she has focus, she'll have 100% evasion, right? Plus the 30% from Setsuka, plus the 20% from Assassin Cartusia. Technically, you can make it so that Eligos doesn't have a chance to hit you, right? Yeah, which is kind of nuts to think about. He can take away your focus and, you know, reduce Flan's evasion to only 50%, but then she gains the 50% from her allies, and so she still has a 100% chance to dodge. That is going to be disgusting. But speaking of other evasion units that are out there, very popular ones that are being used, obviously you can also run this with units who buff themselves with evasion. So anyone who gives themselves an evasion buff, like Celine for example, which is kind of cool. But then you also have Specimen Says, who has evasion 50% plus the 20% from an artifact here that you can run. Arbiter Vildred, surprisingly, because of his EE, he revives with Dark Contract's effect, which grants Archdemon's Might, and this increases his attack by 30% and evasion by 50%, plus an evasion artifact here, for example, and now you're cooking. You have 100% evasion potential counter Arbiter Vildred that's going to be on your side, that's going to be really nasty to deal with, right? I'm going to throw BBK in here as an example. You could run BBK on an artifact such as Shepherd of Chaos. Shepherds of Chaos, as your HP decreases, evasion and defense increase by up to 40%. So if you have a really low HP unit, you can use Shepherds of Chaos, and that gives you 40% evasion, plus the 30% from Setsuka, and now you're at 70% evasion, and if you're running the evasion set that allows you to have a chance to counterattack, let's say on something like BBK, suddenly she's looking a lot scarier, right? With a huge chance to counterattack at low HP. She also has a lot of evasion. It's gonna be really hard to strip her potential buffs and things like that too, especially if you're running her with high resistance. So that could be something to look out for potentially. Right? Closer Charles as well, he starts the match with evasion now, which is kind of cool. His S3 also grants evasion for 3 turns, which is very nice for prolonged fights. He also is pretty good sustain, and he's pretty good cleanup and follow-up damage. Right now, the current most meta evasion unit that's being used right now is New Kid Aiden. So she's going to be very devastating because of her injury. She's going to be even better to use in longer fights because of that, allowing you to burst through your opponent's tanks and other HP scaling bruisers, right, while maintaining your evasion here, and then furthering your evasion with some sort of an artifact here as well, right? So it's kind of cool. But yeah, there are many options that are out there, including, if I keep scrolling down here, like things like Remnant Violet, for example, another popular pick for a lot of players, especially into AoE units. When a lot of units have AoEs and are attacking to your team, Remnant Violet can be gaining his focus up really quickly. The thing with his focus gain is when he evades, he gains a focus. So if they hit him, he doesn't get it. You can technically make him 100% evasion by just pairing him up with Setsuka, and then you can gain your focus really fast against, let's say, like a Bellion on the other team, for example, who's hitting you, right? So yeah, a lot of potential that's out there for Setsuka, and she's also really good with just general knights for damage mitigation. I don't have any particular units in mind here, but to protect her from debuffs, you can be bringing things like Ambitious Tywin, who can cleanse. You can bring Last Rider Crow potentially as well. You can also be cheeky. You might be able to use her with Dragon Bride Senya. Get Setsuka to really low HP, right, with her own passive when she attacks, and then anytime your opponent even sneezes in her direction, it'll proc Dragon Bride Senya, and you can possibly clean up your opponent, right, from Setsuka's damage previously. So that could be kind of cool to see. Having something like an Empyrean Ilanov on your side will always be really nice, especially with slower teams, slower units, and all that stuff. So be on the lookout for picking up units that can buff your defenses and put Indomitable and stuff up on your team. Evasion scales really well with those kind of defensive buffs because your opponent is not critting you when you evade, right? So it's really nice. Also, in general, I would say it's probably good to make sure that she is not fighting Mort because you want to counter a lot. So if your opponent does have some sort of Mort or something on the other side, and you're, let's say, playing RTA or maybe Arena or Guild Wars, bring something like a New Moon Luna where you can seal his passive, which allows you to continue counterattacking, right? That is also something nice to have. But yeah, otherwise, Setsuka is a really interesting unit, a fire thief that boosts the evasion of everyone on your team, capitalizes very well on the new set that's going to be released, and has a very loaded kit, right? With lifesteal, with counterattacks from the set, with potential Elber's Ritual Sword effect that's built into her kit. She's looking to be a complete package, but in my opinion, might be a little gimmicky and still a little too reliant on RNG. But only time will tell how she will do. But with that being said though, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on Setsuka in the comments down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.